This is the Tree of Life, Season 28, Chapter 8. In this episode, we will be applying preference shifting or sequential substitution to the Overton window. It is trite to say that for the most part people exist within reverse substitution. That is, they spend most of their time within their own boundaries, the boundaries between reverse substitution and substitution events. As such, for the most part, they remain anchored to particular exclusive word associations within digital structures. These digital structures reflect the impulses that they acquiesce to, defined both by the set and the not set. Thus, in reverse substitution, these sets are complete and perfectly define the actions of the subject. Incomplete sets sometimes appear in recursion. In sequential substitution, a digital structure becomes analog then back to digital. In preference shifting, that first digital structure can be said to affirm impulse 1 and negate impulse not 1. In the analog structure, impulse 2 is affirmed and impulse 1 is negated. Through full recursion, impulse 1 expands to impulse not 2, and again you have an exclusive, or digital structure. In partial recursion, that is, when acquiescence is compelled by a hierarchy, that first impulse is not expanded to the not set of impulse 2. In this way, partial recursion produces incomplete sets. Now, what happens when the set is incomplete? When the negated set is incomplete, there is a gap in the coverage of that analog structure. This gap limits the flow of consciousness from vessel to vessel according to a filter defined by negation of the first impulse, and becomes exclusionary, since analog structures are contextually dialectical. However, boundaries don't just define an individual's reverse substitution and substitution events. They also define the group as a whole. You must imagine that there are two sets, defined as +1 and -1, which are each one step from consensus, being set 0. These two sets, -1 and +1, are defined by sequential substitution, or preference shifting, such that on one side of 0 is reverse substitution for each set, and on the other are substitution events. That is, consensus becomes the barrier between substitution events and reverse substitution events. To reiterate, reverse substitution events involve acquiescence followed by negation. Substitution events involve negation followed by acquiescence. Thus, moving from -1 to 0 represents a reverse substitution for one group. Moving from +1 to 0 represents reverse substitution for the other group. Likewise, moving from 0 to +1 represents the substitution event for group 1, and moving from 0 to -1 represents the substitution event for group 2. Thus, we can say the consensus acts as the barrier for each group, and +1 to -1 represents the Overton window defining the dialogue in dialectical degeneration. Further, we can define the digital structure for one group as affirmation of a set corresponding to impulses +1 and negation of impulses not 1. We can define the digital structure for the other group as affirmation of impulses -1 and negation of impulses not -1. Thus, in sequential substitution, or preference shifting for group 1, we see the expansion of impulse -1 to the full set not 1. And for group 2, we see the expansion of impulse +1 to the full set not -1. Thus, it is possible to see that the limits of sequential substitution, or preference shifting centered around 0, is the Overton window describing the dialogue in dialectical degeneration. Since we can see that every impulse affirmed or negated corresponds to a set, by limiting sequential substitution to one step from consensus, we can see that these sets are dialectical. Thus, failure to affirm one impulse in a set corresponding to one side of consensus results in preference shifting to the other side of consensus. This is the benefit of maintaining the dialogue within one step of consensus by the dialectical degeneration. That's the end of the podcast for today.